Welcome to the West Ham Boys. Thank you for joining me. Please do become a subscriber of the channel if you like what you hear, like what you see. Very easy to become a subscriber, free of charge, doesn't cost you anything. All my content is free. And if you like what you see in here, then please hit the like button as well. The transfer window has been open for a week now, and there's finally been some movement. In addition to the signing of Luis Guilherme from Brazilian club Palmeiras and the imminent arrival of goalkeeper Wes Foderingham on a free transfer, West Ham have made a formal bid for Wolves defender Max Kilman. But the £25 million bid is way below Wolves' valuation of the player, who think that, he's valued at something like 40 to 45 million pounds. Whether we're going to actually go in anywhere near that offer, I don't know. Apparently, we're still interested in the player. We're going to come in with another bid. There's still negotiations going on. But let's see as to what level that gets to. I don't know. A lot of fans, I did the show about Kilman recently, and a lot of fans are suggesting that 30, 35 million at tops is what he's worth, but probably not much more than that. So we see what happens there. But until the Kilman bid actually happened, most transfer action has been primarily focused on, centered on the potential signing of players from the likes of the Brazilian market. But as much as we're hearing stories that we're in for players, there now has been talk in the past few days about several West Ham players potentially being targeted to move from the club. Look, let's get a myth out of the way straight away. We're hearing yet again that there's very little money to spend and that we may have to generate income from player sales in order to finance player purchases. Look, well, we're definitely not skint, as has been suggested, but we're not awash with transfer money anyway. We're not awash with a big transfer kitty. But let's also not forget that Julen Lopetegui walked out of the Wolves job because of broken promises over spending in transfers. So the last thing he was likely to do was to walk straight back into another scenario where he's been promised funds and that won't materialize. Now, as I've mentioned several times in the past, it's my understanding that we've got a base transfer kitty, a budget of around £40 million. And we would have to sell players in order to increase that kitty. That hasn't changed. I mentioned that quite some time ago, and I've repeated it. And I was even questioned a few times about it. But that's what I've been told. I might be wrong. The information maybe I'm getting is not quite right. But that's my understanding. There's a budget of around about 40 million, and it will be supplemented by the selling of players. But also, I'm sure some more money will come in from the board if need be. Now, I'm sure many would believe that this summer's big name player that was expected to leave was Lucas Paqueta. And I'll come to him in a moment. But with the possibility of not being able to sell Paqueta, fans are now convinced that we're about to sell one or two or more of our big name players. I've been told that this is not the case. Again, though, who knows? But I'm sure, if some club comes in with £100 million bid for one of our players, there's absolutely no reason why we wouldn't seriously consider such a bid. But it is frustrating when these seeming endorsements of selling our big name players are tweeted by journalists such as Romano on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. So when fans see these tweets from such journos, they tend to believe that there's some element of truth in it, some substance to the stories. So here we find ourselves with the notion that the likes of Lucas Paqueta, Mohamed Kudus could be tempted by the Saudi Real. We find ourselves thinking that Newcastle United might be prioritising Jared Bowen as their big name summer signing. We hear that Italian clubs want our best defender of last season, Emerson. And now we're hearing that Man United want to replace Casemiro with Edson Alvarez. And I'll come to him in a moment as well. Now, these stories would all be very well if we had a stable squad a stable base of players to build from. But ironically, these players are our stable squad of players. They are our foundation, along with Alphonse Areola in goal. Without these players, we're literally left down to the bare bones. And it's funny because I always tell you guys not to get too caught up with transfer nonsense, transfer stories that are out there. And yet here I am getting caught up in it myself. Now, in previous videos, in previous videos this week, I already talked about how I think Newcastle, with their financial difficulties, are very unlikely to make a big bid for Jared Bowen. I already suggested that the likelihood of either Paqueta or Kudus would not really relish a move to the Saudi league at this stage of their careers. Now, although on second thoughts, when you think about Paqueta moving to a Saudi club, there might be some financial benefit for him. For all I know, a Saudi club that's interested in him, apparently rumored to be interested in him, is Al Nazir. And they might think that spending £85 million on signing Paqueta might be a gamble, no pun intended, worth making. Because if he does get, if he does get found guilty for the betting charges that he's up against, any club that buys him would lose that money. If he stays at West Ham United, and if he gets done and he gets banned for a number of years, all right, I know he can appeal and all that, but potentially we could lose the money that we paid for him. So maybe Al Nazir is a sort of club that might be thinking 85 million as pocket money. I'm being facetious, but if they are really interested in buying him and they're going to gamble on whether he gets found guilty or not for the betting charges, then they might think it's a price worth paying. But for the player himself, whilst this investigation is ongoing, if he did get bought by Al Nazir, he could make an awful lot more money out of a Saudi contract than he could by staying at West Ham. I've got no doubt that he could probably double, maybe even treble the money that he's on at West Ham United if he moved to a Saudi club. So if he did get banned, there's an awful lot more money in his pocket. Look, I still don't think it's going to happen, to be quite honest with you. I don't think any club is going to come in for Paqueta whilst there's the gambling issue to be dealt with. Now, with regards to Emerson, I wouldn't like it, but I can actually see the logic in cashing in on the player who turns 30 in a couple of months' time. But here I am now having to consider whether I feel the same about Edson Alvarez. It's a rumour that apparently if any club comes in for him, Man United, we value him anything up to £90 million. Look, let's be realistic. We know he's not worth £90 million. But if a club like Man U came in with that sort of bid, would we consider it? As I mentioned before, one of the things that we kind of talked about in the past is trying to follow the model that Brighton have created. You buy players and then you sell them at a profit and then you reinvest that money into the squad. And here is the dilemma we have with Alvarez because, look, Man United apparently are interested in him because they're looking at a replacement for Casemiro. Casemiro is rumoured to be yet another player that could be going to a Saudi club, the Saudi league. But my understanding is that that's hit a potential snag. So maybe Man United will have to keep hold of him, and maybe the interest in Alvarez might not be as great as it was earlier in the week. But if we are to follow the Brighton model of buying players, selling them at a big profit, and then reinvesting, would Alvarez not fit that bill? I guess the one reason why I've got a bit of a problem with potentially Man United coming in for him is that I don't think that we should be selling a player like that to a club that we would consider in the Premier League as being a rival. Look, I know people are going to go, well, you sold Declan Rice to Arsenal, for 100 million, then why not sell Alvarez to Man United for, I don't know, maybe a more realistic figure of about 65, 70 million. But I guess the difference is with the greatest of respect to ourselves, we know we're not at the level of Arsenal in the Premier League. Um, However, Man United, who are kind of rebuilding themselves, they're kind of a club in transit, in transition. They're kind of a club who need to sort of get themselves back up to the levels of the Man Cities and the Liverpools and the Arsenals, and they're not quite there yet. Whereas they're kind of more on the same level as West Ham United at the moment. So I guess that's the problem I've got. Why would we want to sell Edson Alvarez to a club that we can maybe sort of like compete against in terms of reaching Europe, a European qualification in the league? So that's it. That's why I'm torn over this. However, you can see the other benefit of this. If Edson Alvarez went to Man United for, say, 60, 65, 70 million pounds, you can see straight away that we can use that money to reinvest in the squad and buy two players for that money. We can go out and buy a holding midfielder for around about 30 odd million pounds. And we can go out and buy yet another player that we need in another position, a striker, another centre half, another centre back, or another attacking midfielder, whatever. So there is that dilemma. The dilemma of do we follow the Brighton model? Do we sort of, say, well, if we like the Brighton model, so we should follow that and do the same as them, and then and then not be too upset when clubs come in and they want to buy the likes of Alvarez off us? Or do we say, no, we need to build on that? Because when you think about it, as I mentioned at the start, he's part of the fabric of the core players that we have at West Ham. The likes of Paquetá, the likes of Bowen, the likes of Alphonse Areola, Kudus, Alvarez, and to a point, Emerson. Although I can see the logic in maybe selling Emerson. But at the moment, I'm really torn as to the logic of whether we should be selling Alvarez to a fellow rival club in the Premier League that we think we can compete against.